Hey folks, this is Jeff here, and this is the Jeff and Axe Horror Show. Thank you for listening. Axe, how you doing?
Doing all right, man.
All right, well, we came off a pretty crazy weekend this past weekend. We were at the Motor City Nightmares Horror Film Festival. First time goer of the Motor City Nightmares. What'd you think, Axe?
Well, it certainly won't be my last. I had a blast.
Yeah, I did too. One thing Axe and I were talking about, I think we are going to get a booth there next year. But we had a good time, mingling with the celebrities. And Danny Lloyd is a tremendous human being and obviously an amazing talent. And you might be hearing his voice in a future episode of the Jeff and Axe Horror Show. Ain't that right, Axe?
Uh-huh.
A lot of stuff to talk about, as far as the convention and everything. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, really, before I forget, in addition to the convention acts, they have the Motor City Nightmares Film Festival going on. We were able to catch a couple of short films. Now, I already forgot, so you're going to have to remind me of the titles. What were the titles of the films we watched?
Right. We watched 3 films. The first one was Lobbysome. The second one was What Remains, Harper Finch.
Right. Now that you say it, I kind of remember what these films were about. I remember Lobbysome being a Spanish film taking place in this bathroom stall, more or less. And this deal is going on and turns out to be like a werewolf movie. What'd you think of Lobbysome? Out of the 3, I gotta say, Axe, I think that was probably my favorite.
Absolutely. It wasn't anything that we hadn't seen before. It was the classic werewolf. But the claws going into the walls and stuff, they did really good on all of that. The head when it rolls into the guy's lap, all that good stuff. But really, that short, it was kind of like one big poop joke, I kind of thought.
I did enjoy it, though. What was the one in the middle? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
That one was What Remains.
What Remains, yeah. That was the one where the centered around the kid and his father.
And he was adopted.
Yeah, well, we kind of spoiled everything there. But but that one was okay. I didn't mind that one. But I would say Harper Finch was probably the weakest of the 3. They kind of went in order of how I liked them, how we watched them, kind of sequential order.
That was the same for me.
But that being said, I think the people at Motor City Nightmares have a fantastic convention going on, and I feel ashamed that I've never been to it before.
While we were sitting there watching the short films, the rest of the audience that was there with us were all very smart people, and they all had very interesting criticisms, and I tried to sit and listen to what everybody was talking about the films, and it wasn't a dumb crowd at all. Everybody was paying attention. That was definitely, it made the rest of us horror fans look good, I thought.
I completely agree with that. It was nice to commingle with people of your own kind. I think, the circumstances are going to be a little different for us next year. We're going to be getting a vendor booth or looking into maybe a sponsorship, because this is definitely the convention that's very close to home for both of us, and they bring in some top-notch celebrities. And one last thing on the Motor City Nightmares. I'm going to say this on air, and I really don't give a damn if he hears me or not, but Scott Ian is a dick.
Fuck Scott Ian. Fuck Anthrax.
Let's not go that far. Let's not piss off our any listeners that listen to Anthrax. To summarize it, Scott Ian is just not a very personable person. We asked to do just a simple voiceover for the podcast, and some people were happy to oblige, but Scott Ian was not one of those people. So, whatever.
Short-ass motherfucker.
Right. But that's all we got to say.
He's fucking short, man. No, he is short.
Oh, he's
that
an
motherfucker is short.
I
had no idea that. I had no idea how short that guy is.
Yeah,
he's short, man.
he is. He is a really short dude in person. You see him up on stage and you can tell he's short, but that is just ridiculous. But
he ain't got the time.
Exactly. He's short, and he's short with people, too. But that being said, yeah, the Motor City Nightmares acts complete success in my book. Just
fun.
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot of fun. Gonna get to some stuff that both of us watched this week. Axe, I know you said you watched something, and I got a few things to share. But before we do, we'll tell the listeners what the theme is this week. The theme this week, Axe, is mall horror, going to the mall, more or less. And we're going to be watching 2 mall movies, and the first one we're going to be watching is from 1978, and it's Dawn of the Dead. And the other one is from 1986, and that's Chopping Mall. But before we get to that, I will tell you, Axe, what I watched this week. Even with the convention, I was still able to watch a few things. I was surprised because we were so busy this past weekend. So from 2019, Axe, I watched a movie, Horror Noir. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Noir. And this is called A History of Black Horror. And this is a documentary on Shudder, because you know how much I love Shudder. It kind of tells the story of African Americans in horror, and it talks about how they got started a long time ago with some of the landmark filmmakers. One of the first films ever, Axe, if you've heard of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, was one of the first independent films ever, and black people look at this film as a horror film because it depicts a black man being chased by Ku Klux Klansmen. It's pretty horrifying, and this came out back in the early 1920s. This documentary kind of talks about how African Americans have made their mark in horror. One of our films this week, Axe, is Dawn of the Dead, which features Ken Foree in a tremendous role.
Such a great actor.
He is. He's an extremely talented actor, and he also talks in this documentary here that I'm talking about. But just covers the blaxploitation era, just a lot of stuff. Talks about some of the modern filmmakers, filmmakers such as Jordan Peele. So like I said, it's a pretty good little documentary on Shudder. Shudder has a lot of these documentaries they put out, and they're, these Shudder originals and stuff, and there's some really good stuff. But from 2002, I watched a movie called The Frightening. This is a David DeCouteau movie. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This director is known for his homoeroticism. There's a lot of that in this film. So I was kind of coming in knowing what to expect and everything, but this is a kind of an interesting movie that is kind of set in this high school, and it tells the story of this guy that just moved to this high school, and he's trying to get used to things, and this high school is divided by geeks and jocks, basically, goths and jocks, essentially, and just like regular fucking high school used to be, or still is for that matter. It's been so long, Axe, since I've been out of high school, I wouldn't really know, but I'm sure it's still, cliques everywhere. But it's a pretty good movie that centers around him being in this high school, and while this is going on, there's these like frat boys that are kind of on the loose in this high school, and these like drama club kids, and they're killing off everybody, and it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty good movie. Came out 2002, so it's a little dated, but it's not too bad. Another one I watched, Axe, was from 2018, Coulrophobia, which is the fear of clowns, Axe, also known as Terror Trip. This movie is directed by the same director that directed the movie Zombie Women of Satan. This is a British film that kind of tells the story of this psycho circus troupe, this family. They have their little sideshow set up in the middle of nowhere in the Scottish Highlands, and it tells the story of these roller derby girls that are on their way to an event, and they get kind of sidetracked by these circus freaks, and it's pretty wild movie. Lots of TNA in this one, Axe. And if you saw Zombie Women of Satan, you wouldn't be surprised. But a couple more here for you. Another one I watched, this is recently got a DVD release, I think for the first time on Arrow Video. And it's a movie from 1982. It's called The Slayer. This kind of talks about this girl that she's an artist, and she ends up going to this island with her friends, this kind of deserted island that one of their friends has a connection to. And she sees all these visions of this really nasty creature, and somebody's stalking her dreams, and kind of turns into like a little bit of a slasher, but it's kind of like a ghost story. Pretty good film. It's pretty good. And then one more, Axe, I got for you. I know you've seen this one, and we can maybe chat a little bit about this one. You and I all the time chat about what sequels are really good and what sequels are really bad. And we always talk about this, not always on air, of course. Our listeners would get tired of hearing us talk about sequels and everything. But I did watch a sequel, Axe, and it was from 1987, and it is The Slumber Party Massacre 2. And I gotta be honest, Axe, I've never seen this before. I have seen the original Slumber Party Massacre a million times, but I've actually never bothered to watch the sequel.
What do you think?
Personally, Axe, I thought it was fantastic. I'm probably on my own little island saying that, judging by your reaction there. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought the drill in the guitar, set in the guitar as the main murder weapon, was just awesome. Like the creativity here, I don't know. You got to admit this, Axe. The soundtrack is killer, and that pun totally intended there. But killer soundtrack for Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Dude, actually, I'm totally with you on the island. I'm with you. The guitar sells it. It's right on the cover. Those movies are just always so much fun to watch because they're sleazy, they're gory, they're just everything that was great about the 80s.
Man, I just couldn't stop watching it. The sequel is only, about 70 minutes long, so it's really simple and just right to the point and just phenomenal stuff. And, we're talking about movies here made by a female director. When you see women do that kind of thing in horror, and especially in the 80s, it's really refreshing is what I'm saying, Axe, to see that kind of thing.
And she did it on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. The Slumber Party Massacre films are just absolutely phenomenal. They're so trend-setting as far as the horror genre.
They were one of the first franchises to really held out.
The careers that those movies were able to launch speaks for itself also. So yeah, Slumber Party Massacre 2. That's what I got, Axe. What do you got this week?
We already mentioned that our feature films are about malls, but a side note, Chopping Mall happens to also be about robots. There was another robot film that came out about the same time as Chopping Mall by a man, you might know him. His name's Wes Craven.
Nope, never heard of him.
The movie's called Deadly Friend. It's from 1986. It's got Christy Swanson.
Okay.
A robot. This movie is cheesy as fuck. And it's awesome. I mean, it's Wes Craven at his best with, humor and horror mixed together. The movie is about a boy who loses his girlfriend. She dies in a horrible accident. And he kind of Frankensteins her back to life with a microchip from his robot that he steals from his robot. Puts it into her brain and brings her back to life, all weird science-like. Then she's all demonic and crazy as you would expect. I won't say that this movie has any super great special effects or anything like that, but it's got a pretty solid script. And the robot itself, BB, is actually really cute. Really lovable character, like R2-D2 or any other famous robot role. Johnny Number 5 or whatever. Robots are great. And Deadly Friend is in film. I also want to mention it's also got Anne Ramsey in it. She was also from The Train. She's great. Everybody knows her face if they don't know her name. And like I also said, Christy Swanson, who is great in this movie. I actually recommend it, mostly just because I'm a huge Wes Craven fan. It's, maybe one of the better robot killing movies. Not too many of those.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. Obviously, Wes Craven in his day had a lot of films to his credit, and that one kind of slipped over me. But I feel that one acts has kind of slipped over a lot of people.
It's fun. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, it sounds pretty interesting, actually. All right, well, as we said earlier, folks, it is Mall Week, or at the mall, whatever you want to say. Axe, I thought we could start in chronological order here. So we're going to start with 1978's Dawn of the Dead. Of course, this is directed by the legendary George A. Romero. And this movie Yeah, who the hell is that guy? This movie kind of starts off... It just starts off real chaotic, Axe. It starts off at the news station. The SWAT team kind of comes in and evacuates everybody from the complex, and just all hell breaks loose from there.
And what the fuck is up with the patch? The dude with the patch.
That's a really good question, actually. I have no fucking idea. But there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie, especially right off the bat, with the SWAT team gets involved, and there's a lot of, obviously, with our four main characters here, there's a lot of character development from the four of them, especially Ken Foree's character. One thing I want to say, another thing before we, start talking a little more about it, Axe, is Dario Argento actually, with the help of Goblin, did the soundtrack to this, did the score, and it has some phenomenal music.
It does.
Also, watching this again, you really kind of feel bad for Roger in the end, even though he's a dick, but you kind of do feel bad for him.
The wagon sequence, man, it just pumps me up every time. I love it.
Absolutely. It's crazy how he ends up getting infected, really by his own stupidity. Lots of stuff going on in this movie, Axe. One of the more iconic scenes in this movie, towards the end of the film, is when the bikers enter the mall, and of course one of the main bikers is of course Tom Savini. They just kind of race hell. And another thing that really stuck out to me, Axe, is the ability to drive all these vehicles and stuff through this shopping center. At one point there was a fucking car that was being drove through the mall.
It happens to be the Monroeville Mall, to be specific.
Yeah, exactly. The Monroeville Mall in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. I've been to plenty of malls in my day, and obviously when you're walking through there, you see like they have like a raffle for a truck or a car or something like that. But that's completely different than, driving it through a mall. But I mean, they had to have got it in there somehow. So, it's just a really strange thing to see. Another thing I really liked was the whole sequence, Axe, when they're kind of hunkered down in their room and they're playing like the goofy games, the video games and the sports and all that kind of stuff, that whole montage.
I like all the romance with the candlelit dinner, and there was so much great script writing and character development, like you said. It just paces throughout the whole film. George is iconic.
It's just a really good film. I really enjoyed watching this. I had told you at the convention that I actually watched the extended cut, the long version, so I had to devote 3 hours of my life. But, it's 3 hours well spent, so that's the way you gotta look at it.
It's not even the first time spending that 3 hours.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, Axe, it won't be the last either. I think this is a great film. What kind of stuff stuck out to you, Axe?
Oh man, the zombies. I love to listen to Tom Savini talk about how they would just dream up of different ways of killing zombies, and screwdriver in the head and all the different creative ways of beheading people and, carnage. Tom Savini was an expert at that because he was a military veteran who did photography and had to witness some very gruesome things. So that's, I think, why he had such an advantage over a lot of other people. About the zombies, right off the bat, right at the beginning of the movie, you got the shotgun blowing up the one guy's head in the apartment, and that's a great head explosion. Also, really like the two kids, when they get the helicopter. The two zombie kids are great. The zombie who gets the top of his head chopped off from the blade of the helicopter. Many cool things, and obviously Tom Savini on a motorcycle. I've always really liked the wagon scene. To me, it's very endearing. Really feel it's like kind of a bittersweet feeling of trying to enjoy things while they last because they're on their way out. And everything about George Romero and his movies is a social commentary. Really want to get into the psychology of things. It's probably one of the first films to be filmed in a mall. When you're watching the behind the scenes and stuff, they had to struggle with getting scenes done at night while the mall was closed because, morning shots and there's people coming in, and checking out the set and seeing zombies and stuff. It must have been rad back in the day, but it's not my favorite of the Dead movies. Day of the Dead is my all-time favorite. I like them all. They're all my favorites. Dawn, the charm of it, the effects, they didn't have as much money. The makeup, with the cheap blues and grays and greens, just mass producing these zombies, just slapping the shit on people as they go and say, go walk like a zombie. And, it's just a shame that they had such a low budget. But at the same time, that's also why his movies were so great, was because he didn't have as much producers telling him what to do and what he can't do. And it's the longest of the Dead movies, I believe.
I definitely think I know it's the longest for sure. Some of the other Dead movies have been pretty lengthy. I know Day is pretty long itself. But yeah, overall, Axe, it was good to see it again. It's been a while. Dawn of the Dead is one of the movies that I don't give a damn what I'm doing and I don't give a damn what kind of mood I'm in. If I have 3 hours to give, just about, I will be more than happy to put this movie on.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really talk about the original anymore without at least bringing up the fucking remake, which was actually all right,
Well, I was just going to say that, people are going to get pissed off if we don't talk a little bit about the remake. This remake came out in 2004. I think that as far as doing it justice, I really think it did. I think that this is one of the better remakes of the Dead series. There's not a lot of remakes and stuff. I know there was a direct-to-video sequel of Day of the Dead, and it was absolutely terrible. There's a lot of movies that have kind of spawned off of, there's millions that have spawned off of the Dead movies. Obviously George Romero has done that. He has been so influential on everybody in the horror genre that's ever decided, hey, I want to make a zombie film. But as far as the remake acts, I enjoyed it, but it just doesn't compare to the original. Now, I was just thinking about this, but because I just mentioned something about some of those movies that were kind of spawned off of, and I know I'm veering off here a little bit, so you'll have to excuse me a minute, but those movies that kind of spawned off of the Dead series, and one of them actually stars Tom Savini, and it's called Children of the Living Dead, and it is, in my opinion, one of the worst zombie films ever made. And I don't know how he ever got involved with this, but have you heard of this film, Axe?
I've seen it too.
Yeah, it's a movie that you don't want to see ever again, and it's just.
You know what though? I absolutely love Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead.
I actually do too, Axe. I think it's a great remake. And there's a lot of diehard horror fans that shit on this movie, but
I don't. I absolutely love it. It's probably, like I said, I like Day of the Dead out of George's movies, but I probably like the remake of Night of the Living Dead. Probably second best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really good film, and I don't think that that film gets talked about enough. Tom Savini did a great job, and that's one thing about this guy is that his accolades speak for themselves, but he is a multifaceted, actor, director, special effects artist. He can do it all. Well, actually, every show we gotta give our ratings, and I'm gonna let you do the honors on Dawn of the Dead. So out of 5 blood drops, what say you, Axe? How many blood drops are you giving Dawn of the Dead?
I mean, 5. Obviously, it's as good as they get. It's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. There's absolutely nothing bad that I can say about it.
I would agree, Axe. I'm going to give this 5 blood drops too. And I would say that I would give this so many damn blood drops that I would require a transfusion. Dawn of the Dead is just, it speaks for itself. It's in a class of its own. And it is a treasure, and it was great to relive some of the great scenes of this movie, and great to watch this again, Axe. So we got one more film, and it is from 1986. It is called Chopping Mall, also known as Killbots. You kind of mentioned it earlier a little bit about this movie's kind of about robots. That's essentially this mall kind of hires these robots to be their new security team. And, as they say in the movie, what could go wrong, and everything fucking goes wrong in this movie. The robots kind of, start picking off everybody one by one, and this kind of starts when these people that are working there at the mall, these employees, are kind of there for an after hours type of party. And the robots have the security system that they only require, require you to present your name badge. It's kind of like the modern security systems we have, only it's just with fucking murderous robots. But what was your thoughts, Axe, on Chopping Mall?
Well, I have many thoughts. The first one I want to talk about, though, comes from a quote from the movie. It was actually phrasing a quote from a different movie. John Terlesky, who played Mike Brennan, shows his ID badge to the robot, and he says, "Klaatu Barata Nikto." I knew that from Army of Darkness. I'm like, okay, but this movie's older. What's up with that? So I had not known this before until I looked it up. But originally, it's from The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. I feel bad because I was not aware of that before, but this movie helped point me in that direction. If you didn't know, Klaatu Barata Nikto is actually from The Day the Earth Stood Still.
I actually did not know that.
Hey, well, it's just a little, he says it when he shows his ID badge, and it just caught me off guard, like, what the fuck, this isn't, I know I've seen The Day the Earth Stood Still, but it's been a really long time. But back to Chopping Mall, it's also got, and she's a great scream queen. She's done plenty of movies. I wouldn't say this one was her best. She was really great in From Beyond and Reanimator. Actually got quite a lot on her list. Puppet Master, Trancers 2. Like I said, I really like her in From Beyond. That's my favorite role. But she was great in this movie too. Some weird shit in it too. Like, I kind of don't understand why they're going to party at the mall and they're like having this weird orgy in the furniture store. I don't know. That whole scene right there was just, what's going on, and were people really like this? But there's a good head explosion from one of the robots. It's as good as the one in Dawn of the Dead, but it's in there. Robots shoot these tasers, and there's they electrocute people to death, and there's explosions. And in the 80s, like I talk a lot about this, but it's tongue in cheek because we live in an age where we have internet and everything is totally accessible. But back then in the 80s, you would stay up late at night just to see a pair of tits. Things were so much different, and that's all it took to keep a young person's interest back then. It's not the same now. If you're trying to make a horror movie and selling it just off of that, it doesn't work anymore because we've got free access. But going back and watching these old movies, that was part of the marketing. And so, I joke about it. It was the 80s. I don't really have a whole lot more to say about this movie. It was just okay. It's got a couple good scenes in it. And like I said, I didn't know that about Tu Verrà Nicto. So I'm glad that movie taught that to me. What'd you think?
I'm with you, X. I like this. I really enjoyed Kelly Maroney in this. I thought that, me personally, this is some of her better work. She's obviously in The Zero Boy. She's in a lot of other movies. I thought this was a pretty good film. I feel that if the budget would have been a little higher for this movie, X, I think this movie really would have knocked it out of the park. But it was like you said, it was the 80s, and it was, kind of still in that cheese era, One thing I did really like is I like some of the early killings. I really like the one where the guy is kind of sitting in the control center and he just keeps looking around, and eventually the flap opens up and the robot shoots the trank into him, and it's a pretty good film. But I wouldn't say it's, compared to some of the other 80s movies that we talk about, Axe, I don't think it really stacks up. I think that it's a little bit dated, but I'm with you on the whole, why are we hanging out at a fucking furniture store in the middle of the night just doing nothing and, doing nothing but partying?
The dude's having sex. And he's like, "You smell like pepperoni." She's like, "All right." He's like, "But I like pepperoni."
And that's another thing is, I think the script of this, is a little goofy, but it's all right. It's not a great film by any means, but I think it's definitely worth the watch. I'm gonna give Chopping Mall 2.5 blood drops. What do you think?
I'm gonna go with 2. I'm not even gonna give it that other half. I'm gonna go with 2. It's really not one of my favorite movies, but it's one of those films that if you're a serious horror fan, you should definitely check it out once. And it's definitely got one of the cover art. The movie poster itself is legendary. I think it's one of those ones that always stood out in my mind when I would walk into the video store. Chopping Mall has a very cool cover, but unfortunately it doesn't got the goods inside.
I completely agree. It's just nothing to write home about, Overall, it's an average at best. That's what I gave it. I gave it an average rating. You gave it a little below average. So there you have it, folks. We have 5 blood drops for Dawn of the Dead, 1978 George Romero classic, and 1986 Axe went with 2 blood drops on Chopping Mall. I went with 2.5. Well, it's been a pleasure, folks, and thank you again for listening to the Jeff and Axe Horror Show. My name is Jeff.
This is Axe.
We'll catch you next time.